Welcome to the OTTRED Spotlight podcast, this time focusing on the personalization powerhouse. We've got two experts in the field talking to us in this podcast about their perspectives of where personalization has come from historically as a topic, its relevance to the market where we are now, but maybe more interestingly where we're headed to as well. Roberto Bomonini, John Aspin-Nergard, it's fantastic to have you in the studio at the BEDROCK Streaming podcast here at IBC 2024.
Thank you.
How's your event been so far?
It's been fantastic. It's
Day
been
two, you're still alive?
Yeah, still alive.
Yeah.
I would call the first day was complete mayhem, back-to-back meetings, but so many interesting things to dive into.
Interesting things happening at the moment.
Yeah.
Right? Roberto?
I'll keep the point of view of being a vendor. I'm obviously being at my booth. So my colleague was telling me, "Hey, have you seen Hall 14?" I'm like, "Do they let you out?" So it's been good from a traffic perspective. So I think it's good to see many people coming around.
Yeah, definitely. I spoke to somebody earlier and bumped into them before it opened to the public. I was like, "Hey, how was day one? How was your evening?"
Yeah.
Their response was, "I survived." I'm like, it's about all you need to know about the mentality of him being here. Look, guys, personalization has always been a relevant topic. It's a particularly relevant topic now, and with the emergence of the gravity of the emergence of so many different technologies and the importance of personalization, it's important to talk about where it might be heading as well. So just introduce the organizations that you're from and the context of this topic with those organizations. John, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I'm CTO in Allente. Allente is a Nordic TV operator, or pay TV operator. We deliver TV over satellite, over IPTV, and of course, OTT as well. So in our context, it's personalization inside our TV Everywhere service and inside our OTT service, and how we provide that in different devices.
And if people don't know those services, what's the subscriber base, what's the user base that you're accountable for in that CTO capacity?
Approximately 1 million households in the Nordics.
Big footprint.
Yeah.
So, Roberto?
So Renato Bonamini from ContentWise. So what we do is actually we work with Allente, one of our customers, in providing personalization. So we have C2 products and services consulting to actually help companies achieve the goal of personalization, which I'm sure we go into details of what that means.
Why don't you start us off with that? What is personalization, and where's it come from, and what's its relevance to the market now, where we are?
Yeah, I always like to show it at like a kind of a level. So, 15 years ago, companies started looking for the traditional recommendation engine. So, our recommendation engine is part of personalization. I like to describe personalization as a broader set of features. So, if you think of a recommendation engine as a single list of items recommended for you, personalization takes that and amplifies it to a multidimensional perspective. Maybe it's personalized categories. Maybe it's personalized user experience, which like you get your widgets, your look and feel for the experience, down to personalized imagery. So taking every aspect, not just personalized content, but the recommended way for you to browse, to navigate, to experience a service. So I think personalization includes all of these abilities.
John, what's your take on that? Where's it come from? What's the relevance to your organization strategically? Where do you rank this in terms of the list of strategic priorities?
We rank this very, very high. As you know, personalization is critical to kind of create a great user experience that makes customers come back again and again and again into our service. So, and TV has been a lot about personalization. If you go off 15, 20 years back, when niche channels started coming big, that's parts of the custom personalization journey that we have been on. Yeah. Aggregating niche channels into our DTH service or IPTV service. Then now we're talking about how do we create that personal user interface? How do we create that customer journey that is optimized for you as an individual? Yeah.
Personalization as a topic, the clue is in the name, is a very subjective thing, right? Personal thing.
Yeah.
Quite often when people talk about this, they're talking about user interfaces. Would you agree that that's most of what the topic of personalization constitutes, or is it a much richer, deeper topic when it comes to the way that you guys think as domain experts?
I think it's a much richer and deeper topic than just the user interface. It's about how do you connect with the user? So what kind of emotions do I want to have my customers to have when they open my service? And what type of content do I offer to them? What time of day is it? What day of the week is it? So there's so many aspects and dimensions into personalization that I think we're just starting to kind of scratch the surface of it, and also scratch the surface of what is actually possible when you see the rise of AI now as well.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a second,
Yeah.
John. What are your thoughts, Renato?
Well, UI is definitely the focus, being that media entertainment. It is visual. It is something that you watch. So UI has the biggest pie, share of the pie when it comes to the efforts. But off-platform notifications, there are a lot of areas where personalization can come into place. But definitely the biggest bang for the buck is working on the UI. You expect something that when you're browsing through your surface, it understands you. And I think that the biggest target as a goal when we do planning of personalization efforts is how do we make a user want to come back to the service? Because the in-app experience, when the user is there, finds the content quickly because it's the content they're looking for. We know their expectations, we know they're looking for, their behaviors, so we make it easier for them to find content. That's the immediate goal. The long-term goal is make them want to come back to your service because they know that what they can find there, they can find it easily, and it feels personal to them. So it goes beyond just a UI perspective. It's creating the sense of feeling that the system gets me.
Yeah. Let's talk about it then in terms of the future. And you mentioned AI. For where we are now, with AI still being a relatively new embryonic topic, what do you see the role of AI as in personalization in media experiences?
So we've been keeping definitely an eye from a research perspective now as part of what we do for my company. We started as a startup, traditional researchers, so we still do a lot of research. And what we find out is that there are some technologies, especially in the generative AI space, which everyone talks about. And we've been debating now, like for example, if you come to our booth, there is no AI in anywhere generative AI. So we use generative AI, for example, for enriching metadata, creating categories, for the work which is very useful from a technical perspective in having the natural feeling of the results of a GPT transformer that what it does best. A lot of people have been trying and testing recommendations. Hey, ChatGPT recommendations are great. Not to say that they're not great, but how much does it really know about you? So some things we see that traditional recommendations like fulfilling user experience, list of ranking, recommendation in traditional ways, I think that the technologies that have been used so far still outperform from a cost, performance, and response time perspective. So we're still there. There are some applications that are definitely the ones that we should be looking for. Automation, editorial support, assistant to the editorial team. Create a carousel with the top rated movies for this week that star Tom Cruise. Now earlier you have to write SQL queries and add fields, interfaces. Now the assistance to editorial work, it's another example, or semantic search. Very specific areas, but the pure traditional recommendation perspective, which I know a lot of people have been trying to work with, I have my doubt that it's exactly the sweet spot of application.
What about yourself, John? Have you hothoused or incubated any trials or implemented AI at Allente?
I think for us it's also very, very early days in terms of AI. So we're looking into different ways of personalizing experience, and then it becomes quickly a lot larger than just the user interface. How do we provide customer service to our customers? How do we work internally with tech development, testing, and so on and so forth? Yeah. And then, of course, figure out a way of making search queries more of a natural language for our customers as well, but also for our editors, so that it's more simple for the editors to work with natural language when they're creating. Let's make a top list of the top 5 sports events for the past week. And so
think of voice search, which nowadays it becomes much more effective if you have something that understands and works better. It was really awkward earlier in the days. Show me movies with. It's very articulate. Now that's an application, for example, where it really makes a lot of sense.
I've got a question for you guys around regional appetite. Now, John, you're obviously in the Nordics, but I know that your peer group and the people that you interact with is extensive on a global basis, and certainly from a content-wise perspective, I hear your name from organisations around the planet. Do you see that there's a regional accent on the appetite to test and trial AI? You know, is it more prevalent in North America than the Middle East, for example? Or, you know, do either of you guys see that when you're talking to peers, or maybe from a content-wise perspective, clients? Is there?
I think it's more related to the type of, so you have broadcasters, you have streamers, you have triple play providers.
Yeah.
Rather than region, I was regional in our country. Europe, there is a lot of attention on privacy, obviously. US doesn't care. Well, what is privacy again? Unless you live in California, but okay. So there's definitely a different appetite, but it goes towards region and the type of operator you are. Traditional operators are very worried about how do we implement it, cost perspective. So I think it's a combination of region and the type of operator. We're more focused on the type of operator.
Yeah. John, you attend a lot of conferences, industry events, and interact with people at your level in other organisations. What do you see?
I think Renato is basically touching upon it. It's kind of Europe has a more natural skepticism to everything that involves personal data, and of course, in order for AI to be great at personalization, it needs a lot of data to do that. And I think that skepticism is healthy because it forces us to think a little bit more before jumping into it, and maybe even create better services that caretakes more for the individual's privacy into that. The Nordic region is, I don't know how to put it, but for some reason we have always been early adopters for new technology, and it's kind of, you see it on EV cars. I think Norway has the highest EV car take-up in global.
Wow.
I think almost 100% of the cars sold last month was EV cars.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it's similar.
Massive
it has
appetite for new emerging technologies.
Yes, and same has been with media services. So all the streaming services, when they arrived, they had quite decent, fast uptake in the Nordic market space. And so also for AI. So I get a lot of push from my organization to, we need to pilot this, we need to test this, and then it's kind of okay, just we need to think about the security aspects and the privacy aspects. And
I can imagine you're having to field those conversations a lot.
There is one part of the chain, the production part, where generative AI definitely has regional dependence. You know, Hollywood, I live in Los Angeles, and I have to be careful when I mention that I work in AI media, because then people look, so you're the one stealing our job. So yes, that's the only regional function that really it's the production part.
So you both mentioned GDPR and, you know, where the proclivity and inclination is for that to be hypersensitive in Europe, maybe not so much in North America. But let's focus on that topic of data and bring it back to personalization. You know, analytics of data, even if it's not generative AI, how important is that for personalization, and how far can you go?
There are a couple of approaches here. So when you talk about advertising, for example, percentages of advertising, the trend nowadays is mostly to work on contextual because it's easy. You don't need any privacy data, you only need to know the moment. When it comes to traditional personalization, or traditional personalization in general, the more you know about a user preferences and taste and history, the better job you can serve. I always think that the concerns around privacy related to personalization are sometimes a little overrated. If you can explain to the user that you are providing a better service to them, you're not just trying to find out how much money they're making. You are trying to find out what movies they like, what genres, what information to serve them a better service. If you can explain it to them, give it back to them, and giving back to them the control. You don't like what you see, you think the information we have is not appropriate, you want to fix it, you want to correct it, you want to control it. As long as you explain it and you give them control, then most users don't have a problem with it. But you definitely need to have some sort of information. Doesn't mean you need to know who is in front of the screen. All you need to have is a consistent ID.
I think the key word here is contextual, right? Because you need to understand when you're giving either if it's UI recommendation or personalization, or if it's content personalization, you need to understand the context of the human. And for ads, maybe you don't need to understand the context of me as a person, but when I'm talking to you about, I want you to invest 1.5, 2 hours in watching a movie in my service. That's quite a big of investment. So it's 10% of the day. I want you to spend in my service. So
it's a big commitment.
It's a big commitment. And in order for that to happen, I need to know more about your context as a human. It's in a perfect world, of course, I would like to know what kind of emotional state are you in? What are you tired? Have you had a long day at work? Have you just gotten a new girlfriend? All these things are valuable in order to create great personal recommendations, not just what you watched the last week or what other users watched.
We've touched on this before, John, obviously, but at the moment it feels to me, with this very important topic to so many streaming providers and the opportunities they've got, that we're still only touching the surface of what personalization could be. When you talk about data and AI and maybe psychometric evaluations would fall into the AI side of things. But then again, if they're participatory, that's something that's something around the user experience of personalizing their platform as well. Maybe it would get more buy-in if the user or subscriber has actually filled in their psychometric evaluation and then immediately starts to feel the difference of how the platform interacts and suggests.
Exactly. So if you can see the immediate value of providing some data, some context for us, maybe it would increase the uptake and better understanding of, okay, that data is actually valuable not only for the service, but for me as a person. So,
on that, do you guys ever come across or think of, when we're talking about content here, right? We're talking about movies, documentary, that kind of content. If you look at the super apps and the way that they've got a much wider range of content. If we took Yango Play from the Middle East, for example, yes, they've got content, but gaming is the next step along, and then insurance services and, Yango Food, Yango Taxis, etc., etc. Do you guys ever consider internally with your businesses the breadth and horizon of opportunity that exists with personalization beyond just a recommendation form of suggestions?
We have a lot of operators that actually would like to use the information that we collect out of the traditional media entertainment part to do upselling, for example, the traditional example is triple play operators, they want to upsell your favorite phone. And we have information about user, so why don't we use it to better target? The next question is how to use that information for targeted advertising. For contextual advertising, it's easy to explain, but it literally doesn't see you as a person. It's a one moment that it's actually looking at you. While we have a very rich profile, weeks, months of consumption habits, what you're watching, how you're watching, what type of content you like, you might not like. So it is a very rich profile. That information can definitely help improve recommendation in other areas, suggesting, understanding also customer acquisition. From an operator perspective is what type of content is best at acquiring customers. So there's a lot of information that can be used that goes outside just providing back to that cohort of users, but also to acquiring users, do new things, go outside. Hey, here's a podcast that you might like. Very simple example of application.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, of course, we do look in. We call ourselves an entertainment company, so we do look in kind of the breadth of what's possible to bring into our platform. But it's also a lot about keeping focus. One of our biggest value proposition in the market is that our sole focus is TV. TV is what we know best. But then we can start looking into the adjacent spaces, podcast, music, gaming, etc., and see how could that come into our service and both increase the value of our content recommendations, but also increase the total value of our service.
If you look at the pressure from social media and short forms and all the platforms that are converging to the entertainment space, there has some action that needs to be taken because that space is converging very quickly.
Yeah, I wonder what your take is on that, John. There's a generational influence as well to that. The next generation of your subscribers or viewers are the swipe generation. And natural interpretation of what a personalized experience is will be very inherent to the age that they've been brought up in, i.e. probably quite advanced, the TikTok type of person, hyper-personalized. What's your take on that to stay ahead of the curve?
Well, I have 2 teenage daughters. I know very well about TikTok generation. I'm a little bit worried to be quite honest, because if you start browsing TikTok or some of the social medias, it's the personalization quickly becomes siloed. So you just get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper inside one topic. And unless you give some user feedback that you want to expand your horizon and look into other topics, you are going very deep into one topic, and that is a little bit worrisome. A little bit worrisome from the perspective that on an individual level, maybe they won't get the breadth that they would need in their life. And it might trigger some political opinions that might not be too good. So that's kind of the negative side of the recommendations and personalization.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, but if you, as TikTok as a service and the younger generations, they have. I can use my own daughters as an example. Their attention span is much shorter than if you talk with older generations. For them, investing 2 hours into a movie is a much bigger investment than the idea of only investing in 30-second videos, even though they spend 4 hours watching only 30-second videos.
It's funny because when we talk about this, we do often my daughter's 18, my son's 14, I've got younger kids, but they're the TikTok people in my house. And they've got this kind of short attention span thing as well. But you know what? I see that in older generations now as well. There's this creep into older generations where that short form inclination is becoming the de facto standard of expectation. I spoke to a guy who's probably in his late 20s earlier today. He's like, Chris, I live on YouTube because I can just digest what I want on a massive horizon, just surfing around. I'm not limited. It's quite fascinating to see the different psychology around content platforms now. John, I want to ask you a question around the challenges associated to implementing or changing directions when it comes to personalization, systems, platforms, strategies. Have you had to do that? Have you got first-hand experience of what it's like to implement a personalization strategy or process into the business? Massively challenging or relatively easy?
I would say it is, I wouldn't call it massively challenging, but it is absolutely challenging. Because one of the things that you need to go through is kind of the culture of the people and the people that are going to work with this. They have been used to doing their editorial work and curating content, which I still believe is super important and a big part of how we can create a high-value service. But they have been masters on that, and then I can come in and tell them that, hey, you now need to trust this machine to do part of your job. Your job is going to be to instruct that machine to make the personalization as good as possible. And just that small tweak in a work description is actually, from a cultural standpoint in organization, much more difficult than you anticipate. So when we are talking about personalization, I think we discussed this earlier also, Renato, is that because of that, we are struggling to kind of take the full value and capability of our recommendation and personalization engine from content-wise into use. Not that the team doesn't want to, but it's the trust issue into the machine is at least my hypothesis.
Classic change resistance.
Yes.
Personal level.
Yes.
Renato, you got a take on that?
It's absolutely consistent. So if you think of, like, for example, taking a parallel to generative AI, a lot of people are worried, oh, it's going to take away my job. I see personalization as an amplifier of the skills of the editorial team. I see it that way. The hard work is explaining to them and make them realize that what we do is not replacing their work. No. Their work is actually amplified by the abilities of AI in general in broader terms. So if from a technical perspective, like we try to make it as easy as possible, still it's a data science challenge, so there are data issues and reliability and performances, but that's engineering work. With me as an engineer, it's fun for me, but so that can be challenged. It can be actually addressed. The cultural changes in working with the editorial team, anytime there's an operator where the editorial team is not on board, I've seen personalization efforts, they all fail all the time. If the editorial team, they don't see that as a bonus, as a way to make their work better, it becomes us and them. Yeah. Us and them, the editorial team wins. There's no fight.
Interesting.
I'm not saying that they don't want to do that change, it's just that they kind of, it's the building the trust to the machine, that the machine is actually creating value to their
and
everyday
we leave
work.
that part as an afterthought.
Yeah.
A lot of companies realize that it all starts with cultural change in a company.
Yeah.
It's not the limitation. It is not an engineering problem. For as much as I like it to be, the engineering part is, okay, it's data flows and you run models and you run machines. Yeah. It's easy to troubleshoot, but when you try to change a culture and it's not by design, so if you put it as an afterthought, it becomes difficult. That's definitely the biggest challenge I've seen in adopting and companies to change. Yeah. What happens most of the time is a compromise where you have the editorial sections and here's a carousel of recommendations for you. Yeah. When I see that, I understand that, okay, we have to take a compromise, and it's a little bit of a disappointment when it has to happen.
Yeah. Final question, guys, to wrap up what I think has been a great session in a relatively short period of time. What do you see in terms of future trends in personalization services and their implications on streaming services? Is there anything in the immediate or long-term future that stands out as a huge milestone on this topic for you?
Oh, it's a really great question. I think we're talking about more of evolution. The kind of the big milestone is the arrival of AI. We'll see AI improving gradually over the next couple of years, and then we'll see services gradually improving how they take AI out in their service. So that's kind of parts of it, and then I think we'll see a lot of improvements and personalization in terms of UI and in terms of personalization in other parts of the business. So customer service, we are trying to do a lot there to improve there. But I think we're talking more about evolutions in this area. Yeah. But if I want to bet on something, and something that I wish to see more of and that I hope we'll see more of, is what we previously touched a little bit upon, is the psychometrics and getting the contextual of the human inside the personalization. I think that would be very, very interesting.
Renato, final words.
If I could get the psychometrics of stakeholders, so what I see is a great motivational function of generative AI and the whole AI hype that has been recently is finally companies are expecting it to happen. What are we doing for AI? I mean, that must be a conversation that happens in every board level meeting. So finally, companies are pushed to, we have to do something. And I believe that the biggest change that I see happening in some companies that I do see as being the leaders from this perspective is realizing it's not just a tick in the box. Oh, we have to do recommendation. We've done recommendation, we're happy, but it's to measure what's the outcome. Are we looking to increase consumption? Are we looking to leverage our catalog? Are we looking to get new customers? Are you looking into reducing churn? The monitoring aspect, the understanding what are the metrics behind the efforts. I'm happy when customers kind of force us to measure. Some customers even go to the point of, hey, we want to set an SLA on the results, and like, whoa, okay, it's your job too. It's not just ours. So if you don't do well, it's you're on board on this, right? So measuring the results actually justifies why the effort, because the investment is not insignificant, absolutely, that pays my bills, but obviously the return is worth it if you measure it.
Guys, I hope that everybody listening to this or watching this on any one of a multitude of different platforms that in our occupations we'll be very familiar with has enjoyed it as much as I have interviewing your guys.
It was fun, thank you.
Thank you.
It's been great. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.